Subgroup 13, Criminal Investigations, Homicide Offenders, and Profiling.
A criminal investigation is defined as the inspection of a crime which involves the collection of information and evidence from the crime scenes as well as from witnesses or suspects of the crime in order to identify and apprehend the criminals. In Malaysia, the police are the first informants of a crime if a crime was reported. If a report was done at a police station, the officer in charge will write it down and send a copy to the investigation officer who may or may not convey the report to the public prosecutor, as the investigation officer has the right to exercise their authority and launch the investigation immediately. Aside from this, the rest of the general conduct of the crime scene investigation is similar in both the US and in Malaysia. So, first and foremost, the investigation will begin at the crime scene. But what is a crime scene? The crime scene is basically any location where the crime is committed or that may have evidence related to the crime, such as a suspect or a victim's home, although a search warrant is required for that. Well, the first thing that is to be done by the police once they have arrived at the crime scene is to secure it with police tape. This is to prevent any contamination or removal of evidence. Now, secondly, a walkthrough will be conducted to gain insight of the nature of the crime that was committed, including the point of entry and exit. And then, photographs are to be taken starting from the most general to the most specific. Concurrently, investigators will take precise notes of any important conditions that could change over time, such as the temperature of the surroundings or any fluids in the area that have not dried. After general documentation of the walkthrough, the specific minuscule pieces of evidence such as strands of hair, fiber from clothing, footprints, fingerprints, blood, or any sort of weapons will be documented as well. And these pieces of evidences are collected using tweezers or gloves and stored in sanitary bags to prevent contamination. Simultaneously, a sketch of the scene following the true north indicator and measurement of evidence is done. All evidences that were collected are then delivered to forensic scientists for further analysis to obtain accurate information and scientific explanations to aid the police in their investigations. Now, these are the professionals that are involved in the crime scene investigation, and they are the only people who are allowed access. So obviously there's the police, the team leader, the photographer, the sketcher, the evidence recorder, or also known as the custodian, and specialists such as like forensic scientists that specialize in blood pattern analysis, bomb technicians, and also medical examiners.
Next, I'll be presenting about the types of homicide offenses. A homicide is a broad class of crime where an individual takes the life of another individual. Homicide is divided into two categories, which are criminal homicide and non-criminal homicide. A person commits criminal homicide if he intentionally, knowingly, recklessly, or with criminal malice causes the death of another person. At common law, criminal homicide is divided into three categories: murder, voluntary manslaughter, and involuntary manslaughter. The legal definition of murder is the unlawful taking of the life of another human being with malice aforethought. Malice is defined as the knowledge and intention or desire to do evil. Malice aforethought is found when a person kills another person with the intention to do so. State law typically breaks murder down into two classifications: first degree and second degree. Murder in the first degree is murder committed with premeditation and deliberation. To be guilty of the first-degree murder, the defendant must intend to kill. It applies to situations in which someone is accused of killing another person after having planned to kill the victim. Thus, it requires malice and forethought. Any murder that is not first-degree is called as the second-degree murder. Murder in the second degree is an intentional crime that is not premeditated or planned, but is committed with malice, thought, or deliberation. It applies to situations in which someone may have intended to kill another but did not have time to plan for it. Thus, in the second-degree murder, the killer is not intending to kill his victim, but he knows that death is a likely outcome of his action. The legal definition of manslaughter is the unlawful killing of a human being without malice aforethought. These cases are treated as much less severe crime than murder. Manslaughter can be categorized into voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary occurs when a person kills another without premeditation and intent. It applies to situations in which killing another person under extreme provocation or under the heat of passion. These situations which lead to this crime are of the kind when will cause a person of a rational judgment to become mentally or emotionally disturbed. In the absence of such causes, this killing could be regarded as the first or second degree murder. Involuntary manslaughter is committed without premeditation and without the true intent to kill. However, the death of another person still occurs as the result. Involuntary manslaughter applies to situations in which a person died to the recklessness or irresponsibility of the defendant. In other words, involuntary manslaughter usually involves the act of negligence or recklessness that could lead to another person's death. Non-criminal homicide is classified as either excusable or justifiable and is not subject to criminal charges. Some of the examples are killing in self-defense or in defense of another, killing of an enemy soldier in wartime, killing of a condemned criminal by an executioner, and killing by an officer of a person who is committing crime or possesses that threat. Because of the killing was justifiable, the person who committed this killing will not be held criminally liable for the death, but criminal penalty might be still applied under certain circumstances. That's all for my part. I'll pass to the next member. Thank you.
The first example of homicides in the United States is murder. A good example of murder is the Casey Anthony case. Casey Anthony was known for murdering her daughter. For a lot of people allege that she wanted to be the partying mom and wanted to know like the outside world of not having a daughter. Her daughter's name was Kaylee Anthony. Kaylee went missing for 6 months and her body remains were found close to the house. Kaylee was beat to death by her mother, Casey Anthony, wrapped in duct tape. And from the report cases, it was the same duct tape that Casey's father used for his gas cans. His gas cans went missing for about a week or so, and he questioned Casey, and Casey straight up lied to him. But Casey did take them because she asked her boyfriend at the time to help her break into her father's shed and steal the gas cans. When they found the body, it was very graphic. The only reason they found the body was because of bloodhound dogs that they used. The second example is voluntary manslaughter. Voluntary manslaughter is when somebody commits murder or homicide while heated in an argument, drunk, or intoxicated by drugs, narcotics. A very good example for this, for voluntary manslaughter was Albert Berry. Albert Berry was charged with voluntary manslaughter of his wife, Rachel. Albert and Rachel were married, and 2 weeks after their wedding, Rachel went home and fell in love with another man. Rachel was rubbing in Albert's face and started to provoke him. Albert choked Rachel and put her in the hospital. Albert had a warrant out for his arrest, and he was going back to his apartment, or Albert and Rachel's apartment, to talk about why he got the warrant out for his arrest. Try to tell her don't have it, don't drop the charges and everything. Well, when he got to the apartment, she wasn't there. So Albert spent the night there, and Rachel showed up the next day and saw him there. So whenever they started talking, and Rachel decided to yell at him, scream at him, and Albert was shaking her shoulders, grabbed her shoulder, and Rachel came out and said, "Do you want to kill me?" And Albert replied back, "Yes and no." He would say yes and no, yes and no. Rachel started to yell at Albert, and Albert grabbed her shoulders. They both struggled, and Albert strangled Rachel to death. The fourth example of homicides in the United States is involuntary manslaughter. I know the example I'm about to give is very controversial because a lot of people don't think Michael Jackson actually is dead. A lot of people think he is dead. But Michael Jackson's doctor, Conrad Murray, was convicted of involuntary manslaughter of the death of Michael Jackson. Murray gave Michael enough propofol for Michael to commit suicide. And propofol is a type of anesthesiologist medicine that they use to put people to sleep for surgeries or minor procedures. The last example of homicide in the United States is capital murder. Typically, a lot of people will be charged with capital murder from the get-go only because capital murder, a very good definition is committing a murder during a felony. So killing a police officer is a felony. If robbing a bank is a felony, trafficking drugs or selling drugs or having enough amount of drugs on you is a felony. So when you commit a felony and you murder somebody, that is capital murder. And a very good example is the case of Rodney Reed. Rodney Reed was convicted of capital murder of Stacy Sites. Rodney kidnapped, raped, burned, and killed Stacy in the parking lot of Bishop High School. Rodney left his semen on Stacy's face. Rodney also strangled Stacy with her own belt, and other women had come forward and said they were raped by the same man. We're going to jump into the Malaysian part of it. So first-degree murder. What took place? Mana Fenley was hired as Monalin's personal shaman to boost his political career. Mono offered him talismans, pendants, and amulets worth $2.5 million, which allegedly belonged to Indonesia's former Prime Minister Sukarno. Moslin paid her $30,000 and voluntarily participated in a ritual which he believed would grant him more wealth and status. As soon as he closed his eyes and waited for money to fall from the sky, he was decapitated and dismembered into 18 parts by Jerame under instructions of Mono and Afide. Jerame then buried Moslin's body's part. This was a premeditated murder, as Mono and affiliated planned to scam Moslin and of his money because he was so desperate to climb up the political ladder, and killing him in cold blood as soon as he died, then began spreading their newfound fortune, which eventually led to their downfall. In the end, they were found guilty of first-degree murder under Section 302 of the Penal Code and they were executed. Second-degree murder. The murder of Tien Havin is an ongoing investigation. Age 18 years old at the time of his death. Details of the case. He was burgers with his friends. He was eating burgers with his friend, Pravin, around 11 p.m. to 12 a.m. on June 9th of 2017, when he was approached by two schoolmates who constantly taunted and bullied him for being effeminate. The bullies gathered more friends to corner both Nave and Prevalin to beat them up. However, Prevalin managed to escape with several injuries, and unfortunately, Havan was transported to a different location in which he was severely beaten with a helmet until he was comatose. Havan was left unconscious for some time until one of the assailant's brothers brought him to the hospital at 2 a.m. What's currently going on in Haven's case. Haven was in a coma and pronounced brain dead, but 6 days later, he passed away. He was post-mortem. His post-mortem report showed that he had internal bleeding in the head and abdomen. He was also burnt with cigarette butts. His genitals were twisted, and he was sodomized with an unknown item. There have been 4 suspects: Ragasudam, Waklam, who were both 18 years old at the time, while the other 2 assailants were unnamed, and they were considered as juvenile offenders, who have been charged with the murder of Haven under Section 302 of the Penal Code. In my opinion, this is considered a second-degree murder, as they did not premeditate his murder, but instead murdered him in the heat of the moment. Sadly, justice still has not been served for Haven nor his grieving family, and there are some disparities in terms of evidence, but hopefully justice will be served soon with Previn's testimony. Voluntary manslaughter, death of Gopal. On October 31st of 2019, during a Deepavali festivity in Malaysia, family gathering, 2 brothers were engaged in a squabble whilst under the influence of alcohol. Things started getting violent when Gopal slapped his younger brother. In the process, a plate fell and broke into many shards. The younger brother was furious and struck Gopal's face and throat, which caused him to bleed to death before the ambulance could arrive. Why is this considered as voluntary manslaughter? As they all gather as a family to celebrate Diwali, all was well until both parties were heavily intoxicated and began arguing. In the heat of the moment, Gopal was the first to strike his brother. In retaliation, his brother struck him back, but with a dangerous sharp renamid of a broken plate. In most countries, it would be considered as voluntary manslaughter because Gopal's younger brother retaliated after being struck first. However, in Malaysia, it is a gray line between manslaughter and murder because it is difficult to quantify whether the force used to kill was justified or not. Voluntary manslaughter. The death of Tave Sagaman, another ongoing case. Mr. Tave was working as a security guard at Manera Majesty, a condominium. Part of his duty required him to ensure the residents adhere to the standard procedures, SOPs, issued by the government in response to COVID-19. Mr. Ahmed Noor Azhar Mohammed, the assailant, brought his child to the condominium's pool. Mr. Tava informed him that the pool was off limits due to instructions of the management in regards to the SOPs. Mr. Haman grew furious and hit him with a foldable banquet table until he was unconscious. Later on, Mr. Tava was hospitalized and had undergo 8 surgeries. He had to remove the right part of his skull and began losing control of his facialities. He could not speak. Shortly after he passed away. Why would this case classify under involuntary manslaughter and not murder? Before the incident, which occurred between Mr. Tava and Mr. Ahmed, there were total strangers, which meant that there was no connection between them whatsoever, no motive for premeditated murder. Additionally, the CCTV footage showed that Mr. Tava tried to speak to him rationally, but Mr. Ahmed got mad and in the spur of the moment took the table in front of Mr. Tava and hit him with it. Mr. Ahmed did not intend to kill him, but His act of violence as a result of anger caused major injuries to Mr. Tava, which not only caused him to be hospitalized, but faced many health complications, which ultimately and unintentionally led to his death.
So a very good day to Dr. Meg and my fellow classmates. My name is Dante, and let's begin the section 4. So answer the question, is criminal investigative analysis an effective tool for prediction, prevention, and prosecution of serial killers and their crimes? Now, the short answer is yes. But before we understand why is it an effective tool, let us begin understanding what criminal investigative analysis is. So criminal investigative analysis is known for identifying patterns or trends in connected cases. It examines behavior exhibited in each crime scene, and it allows individuals to understand the personality and behavioral characteristics of the offender by implementing scientific tools such as biological tools and psychological theories, and etc. So one of the benefits of implementing criminal investigative analysis, or known as CIA, is narrowing focus by generating leads for law enforcement. So application on CIA is that they apply a lot of investigative strategies, search warrant recommendations, interview strategies. Now, if you're able to predict a serial killer, you are able to prevent his future motives as well, right? So when it comes to this section, the CIA are often using investigative psychology as an assistance, as it provides several perspectives as additional information. It allows faster tracking regarding their next motive, and it allows individuals to understand, or the law enforcement to understand, the serial killer's interpersonal coherence, characteristics, and careers. So the first one is interpersonal coherence. Who did they kill and why do they kill these people? So it is the CIA's responsibility to understand the similarities in these victims and understand why are they killed in a certain way. Now, the second of all is significance of place and time. When is it and where is it? And the similarities between these locations and between these times, and understand the significance behind these things. Why do they choose these places? Why do they choose this time to kill these people? Now, the third one would be offenders' characteristics. Now, when it comes to offenders' characteristics, it's very similar to an individual's demographics. Who is he or she? What is the age? What is the socioeconomic status? What is the education level? Understanding the demographics would actually sort of provide a different perspective, a different aspect for the CIA to understand maybe something else has motivated them to become a serial killer. So the fourth one is offender's career. So throughout the serial killing, throughout the previous crime scenes, understand the evidence that has been given and the signs or the clues as indication to predict the future killings of these serial killers. Now let's move on to prosecution. Now over here, we have a case study. So victim A has been murdered by her husband, and a female friend informed investigators that victim A was the one that caused all the damage to the home. However, after they interviewed the couple's neighbors, it revealed that it was the husband that killed the wife and the unborn child. Now, this again highlights the interview strategy that has been mentioned just now, that through strategizing interview, they are able to see who is the real offender, who was the one that actually led to the murder of the wife and the unborn child. Very similar to prediction and prevention, clues and signs being given as an assistance with scientific tools to prove who is the real offender, with the physical evidence provided, such as objects, blood stains, wounds, fingerprints, or hair. So the benefit of applying CIA is basically narrowing down the amount of suspects, and you would not want to suspect the individuals that are innocent. And that is it for my part. Thank you for your attention.
Hello, Dr. Meg and my fellow friends who are viewing this presentation. So I will be talking about profiling. So as we know, a very good example is that we enjoy watching for a good television program such as CSI, crime scene investigation. So in crime scene investigation, it portrays many elements, regarding forensic psychology or criminal psychology, So it also definitely shows portrays a few elements of criminal profiling. So that is one good way or an easy way which I can explain what is profiling. But if we go deeper, so what is profiling, right? So it is a process of making conclusion based on personality and other characteristics of possible offenders, like criminals who commit crimes and all. So we have to keep records of all their criminal records and everything. And who is it for? So it's definitely the process is applied on criminals, but it is also applied to the deceased, which means dead people, which I will explain further on later. So there is one issue with profiling, like a major issue is that it is not widely accepted in the psychological and legal community. Like this is such as going to the extent of some court have ruled profiling testimony inadmissible. So like why, why is this is it an issue? So the first point is it only gives the type of person who may have committed the crime. So it only shows the crime records and maybe any mental issues, mental health issues that you're going through. And second is that there is no scientific evidence to support reliability and validity of the criminal profiling in solving crimes. So it is not something that we can support scientifically. So which is why it is a little bit difficult to use profiling. But there are certain advantages towards profiling. So, we cannot deny that profiling have proven helpful in certain cases. It definitely have given advantage. It has definitely helped investigators in their cases, right? But nonetheless, further research should be done in order to prove that criminal profiling can be a valid and useful tool in the field of forensic psychology. So hopefully in the future, when further investigation is done, people may find proper evidence to prove and claim that profiling can actually be used as one of the main elements in forensic psychology. And so there may be different type of profiling, but one that sparks interest in the media is the psychological autopsy, which compromises the compilation of psychological profile commonly in deceased individual, right? So as I mentioned just now on why or who can profiling be applied to, as I say, deceased people, right? So it's not only towards crime, so it's also be used in suicide cases, because as you know, committing suicide is also an act of crime, which can be punishable by law. And it still does not give or provide the validity and reliability are still being questioned. So moving on towards re-entry. So what is a re-entry? So it's a process of where inmates leaving jail or prison and returning to the society. So those who have served in prison, they manage to serve their sentence in prison and then they are released back out to, So this process is highly dependent based on few factors such as the sentence structure or the incarceration experience and the post-release resources. So how or if or can profiling help with re-entry? So profiling may help with re-entry if inmates can help inmates into the society to pass records of positive deeds during serving in prison. They definitely have to serve, so there are certain records of the good things they have done, or maybe what are the positive impact they have done while serving in prison. Those are the kind of points. And so that also another point where former inmates are able to understand their pitfall. So this can be helped through therapy, where they understand if they get when they're guilty, why they did that, why, try to understand the background of why they decided to commit these crimes and what are the actions that they can do, to help the society or try to improve in the future. So based on one study done in Malaysia is that the challenges of the inmates faced in re-entry of society. So this is based on a Malaysian study where Tarshini et al. Stated that inmates faced many challenges when they re-entry into society. So why, because there are various factors when inmates are released into the prison, such as financial and social support. So when you are released out from prison, you may not have money. If you are lucky, you may have a family member that may support you, but most of them eventually their family, just abandon them and all. And in addition, the community view them as dangerous or bad people when they re-enter into the society. So this may further lead to inmates having physical and mental health issues as they also suffer from it while serving in prison. When they are in prison, they've gone through so much, it takes a long time for them to build up positivity, good positive mindset. And then when they come out with, the good feeling, but then eventually, they're filled with people with negativity, people are talking bad on them, people are rejecting them. So it's very hard for them to get back into the society because of this. So in order to help with this, so society and community should be more supportive towards released inmates rather than viewing them as negative people so that they can re-entry back into the society successfully. So it's not only, the inmates or past criminals who are serving time in jail, it's their effort to, to repent their mistakes and all, but it's also our responsibility as a community to help them. We have to show them support. So this the one way which I feel like how profiling may help in the re-entry for inmates into the society. That's all from my part. Thank you very much.
Tony Vermilio, and I will be covering behavioral analysis in the United States, defining criminal profiling, risk assessment, and recidivism. First, I will discuss criminal profiling. Before defining it, it's important to understand its genesis. So in the 1970s, in the United States, law enforcement needed a mechanism to help catch criminals more efficiently, and especially serial killers and repeat offenders of serious crimes. From this emerged the father of profiling, John E. Douglas, who worked in the behavioral analysis unit of the FBI. Since the identification of the processes which outline what we know of today as criminal profiling, it has evolved instrumentally in its tactics and processes, and has even changed names several times to include changing from criminal investigative analysis to offender profiling, and what we know of it as today, which is criminal profiling. It combines law enforcement and forensic psychology. So the definition of criminal profiling involves investigation of a crime along with aspirations of identifying criminal, suspect, responsible actors, or perpetrators of said crimes. Its purpose is to identify characteristics of an unknown offender from the known actions they engaged in at the crime. Criminal profiling is more of an art than a science, and it is not exact at all. It's ever evolving, and it combines both law enforcement and forensic psychology to visualize the best practices in crime resolution and prevention. And with prevention, what I mean is reoffending, which we'll discuss later when we get into recidivism. Its methodology considers analysis of the evidence, where the profiler categorizes actions from a crime scene into subtypes, which are predictive of separate sets of offender characteristics. He then considers whether offenders are consistent in their behavior, which is defined as static characteristic, or whether they change, which is referred to as dynamic. They also consider interviews and statements from witnesses or victims or any other observer of the crime. Then they consider the modus operandi, or the MO of the crime or the criminal, and as well as a signature, if there is one, attached to the crime and the criminal. They do all this in order to mold and articulate a psychological and demographic description of the offender. Offender profiling paired with risk assessment helps us to determine the predictability of whether the criminal will repeat his offenses again. This leads us to risk assessment. The definition of a risk assessment is it's an evaluation of convicted criminals' characteristics that warrant them a risk to repeat offending, which is used in determining further actions against that said criminal, such as parole decision, re-entry, or psychiatric treatment. It includes two mutually cooperative sub-assessments. The first is the Risk Need Responsivity Model, or R&R. It emerged as the primary evidence-based framework for moving correctional research into practice. It's used to develop recommendations during risk assessment of convicted criminals, which considers both, one, the risk that they present, and two, what they need and the ability to have those needs met. It then determines what type of environment would be appropriate to place them in an attempt to reduce recidivism. It uses 8 factors. They are history of antisocial behavior, antisocial personality, antisocial cognitions, antisocial associates, substance abuse, family or marital relationships, school and work, and pro-social recreational activities. The second is the level of service inventory revised, and this is another risk assessment tool. According to the Pennsylvania Commission on Crime and Delinquency, it is a quantitative survey of offender attributes and offender situations relevant for making decisions about levels of supervision and treatment. This includes both static risk and dynamic risk factors. Static risk is what we refer to as criminogenic and directly related to recidivism, and dynamic risk factors are those that are amenable to change, and they can include attitudes, associates, and personality, which are directly also related to recidivism. What you see here on the slide is a picture of the BTK killer and what his criminal profile looked like that was included in his risk assessment when they made the decision to not parole him. This leads us to recidivism. So recidivism, simply put, is the tendency of a convicted criminal to reoffend. Risk assessment is a claimed valid method of predictability. However, to what extent it's accurate or reliable, we're not exactly sure. This varies from scientist to criminologist to psychologist, and it does not help in our research efforts. The current status of risk assessment and profiling regarding recidivism is that there are no commonly understood or practiced techniques, and that everyone applies the risk assessment differently. It's always a subjective practice rather than an objective one, and there is not enough research on the specific topic of profiling and risk assessment as means to essentially predicting the future. Even when successful, we may only predict probabilities, but still get it wrong sometimes. And then looking forward, we need more research on this specific topic, more reliable tools, and a less subjective means to identifying those most at risk. I discussed profiling, or the careful characterization of a criminal prior to his apprehension, risk assessment, or the evaluation of a convicted criminal's potential risk toward recidivism or reoffending. But so what? What does all this mean? This matters because ultimately it aids in prevention. This means prevention of serious crime and harm to others and social order by releasing someone back into society who is in fact a risk. It involves prevention of self-injury or worse for those who may offend due to psychological disorders or illnesses. And then it also involves prevention of keeping someone incarcerated where perhaps this is not the best place for them. This not only costs tax dollars, amongst other things, but it overburdens an already overburdened system. And to sum it up in a phrase with a little bit of a psychology spin, is the appropriate recovery or mitigation should match the crime or the stimulus to the punishment or the appropriate response.